Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Shweta. Am I audible enough?
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sorry for the technical glitch I was facing in my system, so I've joined from my system.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So I think we shall start with the webinar now.
Just a moment, I will open my.
So a very good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this webinar on chemical industrial disaster management. So as you must be aware that this is the part one of the webinar. So this is kind of a two-day webinar series. So we will be covering many aspects, and we will be covering this very important and pertinent topic of chemical and industrial disaster management. Every part, every aspect of it in very detail. So this webinar is actually stretched in 2 days. So a few of the aspects we'll cover today, and the remaining aspects we'll be covering tomorrow. So we have expert from NIDM today with us, Dr. Shweta, and tomorrow we'll be having Dr. Anjali Barwal. She is also an expert on chemical and petrochemical disasters. So we all are very well aware of the Bhopal gas disaster. So that has brought in a global awareness on the importance of preventing chemical disasters and the damage to environment and health. And in fact, after the um Bhopal gas tragedy has happened, it has created a lot of awareness and the need to reform our existing acts, regulations, framework, our preparedness, in fact, every dimension, so that we are better prepared for these kind of accidents, so that this kind of misfortune does not repeat itself in future. So this webinar is spread into 2 days, and what all we will be covering in these 2 days, I will give you a glimpse. So today we will be mainly talking about the introduction of chemical industrial disaster management. So Dr. Shweta will be talking about the global and national scenario, then the state profiles, then causes and consequences of these kind of disasters. I will be talking about various legal and institutional framework on chemical disasters. And tomorrow we will be talking about the National Chemical and Petrochemical Disaster Management Plan that NIDM is preparing and is almost completed. And things like tools and techniques in chemical disaster management and the emergency preparedness and first response system. So this kind of webinar should give you an entire glimpse about chemical industrial disaster management. So once again, I welcome you all, and I am very grateful to our Executive Director, Sir Shri Taj Hassan, sir, and our mentor, Professor Anil Kumar Gupta, sir. He is head of ECDRM division. Due to some reasons, they are not able to join today, but their guidance has always been there with us. So let's all start today's webinar. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Shweta Baidyas. So Dr. Shweta is a consultant at ECDRM division of NIDM, and she has a diverse experience in nature-based solutions, eco DRR, and now today she will also be talking about this chemical aspect of disaster management. So most welcome, ma'am. We are eager to listen to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gopal. First of all, congratulate for organizing such kind of webinar because I think this is first time we are doing such kind of webinar, and this is really important that the training modules that we are preparing to kind of pilot testing of those modules, those are really needful because all the participants before we go for the big training programs too, so through the webinars pilot testings are always good. So wonderful. And I have gone through the training model. It is wonderfully built. And I would like to mention here to all the participants that Dr. Gopal is also, you know, on her way to improvise this training module, because it is a bit older now, so she will be working on it to improvise and come up with the latest databases. So today we'll be following the earlier version of the training module itself. So let us start with the first chapter of it. Let me share my PPT. Is it full screen?
Yes, ma'am, it's full. Can you move it so that I can just, yes. Yes, it's moving.
Okay, so today I will give you a kind of introduction to the chemical industrial disaster management. Why chemical industrial? Because most of the industries that use something or else, I mean, some or other chemical. So, and the disasters could be physical also due to some short circuit and all, but in most of the cases, or I will say the most disastrous events or disasters, those we see, those are due to the chemical explosions or gas leak or so. So therefore, industrial disaster always includes chemicals into it. So first, let us understand that what is chemical disaster and how it happens basically. So so as I have told that in all the industrial systems, we are using some or other chemicals, and it is a serious matter of concern for all the disaster management people now. So whether he or she is in private sector or government, or maybe some entrepreneur, whatever it is, they are very much serious about this, because even small carelessness can cause huge. So chemical disasters can be traumatic because their impacts are really heavy on people, and they have resulted in past also in casualties, or lots of damages or to nature and property. And also there are elements which are of higher risks due to chemical disaster, because they include industrial plants and all the employees who are working there, all the workers, and then vehicles who are transporting the chemicals or gases. So I would like to mention that today morning when I was coming to office, there was too much traffic. So I was very surprised that normally at that early morning there is no traffic, but what happened suddenly? So I saw that there was an accident, and one milk van that has toppled up, and I think the driver is heavily injured, because I could see blood stains on the road, and those that vehicle that was toppled, milk was leaking from that, and that entire road was full of milk. And some fire brigade car was also there, and then another crane was trying to straighten that milk van. So these kind of disasters, imagine that a van was of oil, or imagine if that van was carrying some kind of gas or chemicals. So always it is a serious matter of concern, because if something happens, suppose oil tanker is going somewhere and it topples and something happens. So mostly a kind of what we call it as believe, I will explain that at the end. So we can always uh, expect a believe if it is oil tanker or gas tanker. So those are very highly hazardous things. And when it happens, if any nearby cars are there or nearby buildings are there, or people, or if it is a crowded road, then it becomes tremendously difficult to manage the situation, because then the intensity of the disaster will be more. If it is an empty road, then definitely the impact will be less. But then in India, we can barely imagine of some empty roads, you all know. So what happens is, so how these chemical or industrial disasters happen, mostly due to the human errors, because we are human being and sometimes we forget something which were very needful to do, and then some technical errors, maybe something is not working, because in India, as we are almost a poor country, we always try to manage with older things, and until it is you know not working at all, until that point of time we use that old thing only. So then these technical errors happen, and then management errors, definitely if the senior people are not able to manage the things properly, then also it happens. Also it is not always human fault, but sometimes it is natural calamities also. Suppose somewhere some hurricane or cyclone kind of thing, or suppose some tsunami kind of thing is happening, or earthquakes, those are happening. So that can definitely shatter down the entire process, and then you can expect this kind of disasters. So when it is going to happen due to natural calamity, I will not say that it is completely beyond our control, because nowadays early warning system is really good, and we have improved early warning systems. Now though, you can get warnings for cyclones and all even 5 days prior to your actual event. So you can always make sure that you have taken enough care, that even if the cyclone is of the worst of its kind, then also your system is not going to fail and it can withstand, and those kind of things. So these are really important. Yeah, tsunami and all, it is a bit sudden thing, or earthquake, definitely you do not have any prior intimation, or even if there is intimation, there will be very short period of time, few half a minute or minute or so. So you are barely able to do anything for the case of earthquake or tsunami. But then we have to make sure, and that is what adaptation is, that is what mitigation is, that you have to make sure that your system is that uh, improved or careful, that even if suddenly some earthquake comes, or even if suddenly some tsunami comes, then also your system is not going to leak or not going to burst. You have to ensure that. So that is really important. And then what I told, that accidents during the transportation, this is the very common problem, and all the beliefs those normally happens during the transportation. So that is very dangerous. And then waste processing or disposal. So when the chemical wastes are being processed into some place, there also, if we do not know that what are the chemicals those are there in that, then this kind of possibilities are more, because some chemicals might be reactive to some other chemicals. So if we are not knowing the exact composition of the waste, then it is very difficult. So that time, this hazardous waste processing is really mm, a thing where we should be uh, careful, we should take utmost care. And then finally, the terrorist attack or war attacks. So there we barely have anything to do, because we are not knowing that where they are going to attack. And if we are knowing from earlier itself, then it is helpful, we can take precautions. But then if sudden cases are there, we have to be careful that at least we make sure that population density is really really less in the area where there this kind of storage thing is there. Because normally whenever it is war attack or terrorist attack, they will attack the storage. So you have to be careful, and you have to ensure that your locality is far enough from that storage. So even if there is a blast, then also the nearby people will not be affected. So you have to ensure that. So let us look at the global scenario, what we have for the chemical disaster. So first, I will talk about the national scenario, then I will go into the global scenario. So, for India, the event that we mostly talk is the Bhopal gas tragedy. So, in 1984, there was a really tragic incident that happened in Bhopal gas. So, uh, I will not explain that in detail because everyone knows that event, that due to some human mistake, this entire thing happened. And then, we also had fire in an oil well. So in Andhra Pradesh in 2003. So there also a vapor cloud explosion happened in Hindustan Petroleum Corporation. So that is also a very tragic event where we lost a lot of lives. And then limited HPCL, Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, Vishakhapatnam in 1997. And again, an explosion in the Indian Petrochemicals Corporation Limited, and then gas cracker complex Nagothin, Maharashtra, and then recent Jaipur fire in 2009. So you are seeing that most of the fires are happening in mm, either chemical industries or in oil industries, because oil is a thing what is very dangerous until and unless you handle it really carefully. So here we have some list of the incidents those have happened in India and outside. So that says that in 1956 also, so in countries are like Colombia, China, India, France, Nigeria, Iraq, Soviet Union, Germany, United States, Brazil, everywhere you are seeing the number of people are huge. Like the maximum people were killed in Colombia explosion in 7th August 1956, that is 2,700 people. And that too, we do not know whether it is the accurate number or even the number was beyond this. So many people were died. So we have to be really careful. So Bhopal gas tragedy is noted as one of the worst industrial disaster in the history. And then also we have Minamata, Sevaso, Isle Island, Chernobyl. So these all are, major technological disasters that we faced in the past years. So normally in India, all the industries, be it small, medium, or large scale units, everywhere the chemical industries normally include basic chemicals and their intermediates, petrochemicals, fertilizers, paints, pesticides, bulk drugs, and pharmaceuticals. Because if you have a oil industry, there itself you get so many other industries which take products from that oil industry and then they build on that. So wherever there is a oil refinery, you will get many other industries in that similar area, because they use the materials which come out from that oil industry. So you see, like in Gujarat, you will see where we have Reliance refineries, and along with that, so many other industries are there. So, like this, it is a most diversified industrial sector, and it covers 70,000 commercial products. You can understand the variety of the products that we get from here. And then, emergency can arise from anything, any industrial manufacturing or storage or process or transport, because so many industries are there. And you can imagine if 70,000 commercial products are being produced, so it's a huge process. And in that process, anything can go wrong. And any small mistake, any small wrongdoing can, you know, become huge. And that can take lives of thousands and thousands of people. So we have to be very careful when we are manufacturing or we are storing the things, or when we are processing or transporting. We have to be really careful. Then something is known as major accident hazard. So we call it MAH, major accident hazard. So at present, we have segregated the states of India, especially the districts of India, and we have identified that 286 districts total, in which is spread over 26 states and union territories of India, have been identified as the major accident hazard. So let us see in this map. So you can see in this map, in all the states, we have identified that how many major accident hazards, hazard industry uh, hazard or chemical hazard has taken place. So if you see, the numbers varies from 1 to 537. So maximum hazard has taken place in Gujarat. So it numbers 537. So that is the maximum, which is followed by we have, Maharashtra, where we have 347, and then comes your so many things: Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Pondicherry, so all these things. So, in some of the districts which are both colored as well as line shaded, you will see those are like line shades are multi-hazard districts. So, in one district, there are different types of hazards. So, in Gujarat, Maharashtra, you can see that there are multiple hazards along with the number of hazards. So, you see, basically, wherever you have too much of I will say industries, there itself you are having lots of hazards. So wherever you do not have industries like Odisha or Chhattisgarh or Himachal Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, you do not have any hazards. So we have to understand, and from this map also, we also get to know that what are the places where we need to concentrate, or where we need to take more care about these industries, or where we can think of implementing some kind of policies that will take care of this kind of hazards. Basically, not only formulation of policies, but also strict implementation of policies, so that these people are punished heavily if they are not following protocols. Because if one single person, you imagine the entire Gujarat, they are dependent, or on the so many industrial thing. If one goes wrong, then the entire area will be suffering. Okay, so no one should be allowed to you know um, do any kind of wrongdoings. So I can see some of the participants, they have queries that whether they will get certificate. For that, I would like to mention that yes, you will get certificate, but make sure that you have registered for this program and you attend the program for more than 80% of the total time. And you have to give your feedback in the portal once the program is over. And you have to uh, use the same mail ID that you have used for registration. Also, you need to download for, I mean, whenever you are downloading the certificate, you are using the same mail ID. So that itself will get you your certificate. So do not worry. Please listen to whatever we are trying to tell you. Thank you. So next we'll move on to the recent industrial hazards that, or disasters that we have faced in India. So like in 2019, 8th December, there was a huge fire in the factory in Anas Mandi. So, Anas Mandi is a very crowded place in Delhi, and that took life of 43 people and 60 people were injured. The building in which the factory was operating was located in a very cramped up area. So the entry points were too narrow and the fire brigade had too much trouble in getting near the spot. So this is one very important point, that whenever someone is, you know, setting up an industry, they should always make sure that they are not taking place into a crowded place. And whenever you are setting up any industry, any small scale or medium scale or whatever scale it is, make sure the entry points are open enough or broad, because you have seen the fire trucks, right? Those are big, and always it is not possible for them when there is a lot of fire that they take huge pipe to take the water. It's not possible. So you have to be placed in a uh, place where at least fire truck can enter. Otherwise it becomes so difficult for them also to go and you know uh, douse the fire, because we have to remember that they are also human being, and during this process so many of them you know uh, lose their life because they want to save you. Therefore you also need to have some kind of responsibilities. So there are few protocols that you should follow for the fire safety. So if you are joining in any of our programs in fire safety, you will know all that. So they will be explaining vividly. So you, you see, for this Anaj Mandi fire, 35 fire trucks were there and 150 firemen were trying to dose this. But then the blaze was huge. So the factory didn't have the necessary fire safety measures, which is a main problem of all the factories in India, that they do not follow protocols. Then again we had fire in NTPC power plant, and it exploded. So it was in November 2017. So an explosion at 500 megawatt unit was there in Firoz Gandhi uh, Unchachar coal fire power plant. So in fire plant, it is very I don't know whether you have seen any power plant. So if you go to Tata Steel, there you will see that there itself, the system is huge. The temperature that is there, that maintaining the temperature itself is very difficult, because they are dealing with very high temperature, and a small thing or a small failure of anything can cause a huge. So this Unjachar thing exploded and it killed over 40 people. And this plant was owned by NTPC, that's a government organization. But then something went wrong, and the explosion took in the boiler. Mostly it goes wrong in the boiler itself, because in boiler, it's a very high temperature, really very high. Even you can't even think of going into that room, not forget about the boiler. So the boiler pipe burst, maybe it was old or something, and then that itself ignited huge fire, and the explosion set off a lot of dust in the air. So rescue work was very difficult, because when the air is polluted, then it becomes very difficult for people to go there and rescue. So when the explosion took place, around 200 people were there on the shift. So over 100 people were injured, and then other, uh, you know, dead, 40 people were dead. So uh, um, compensation was provided for them. Then we had, firecracker factory mein, we had fire in Shivkashi. So Shivkashi is in Tamil Nadu, and it is very famous for the firecrackers factories. So an explosion caused by chemical reactions, because nowadays in firecracker factories you will see that all small children, they are working, who are much below than 18. They will be like 10, 12 years or 13 years. They are making the firecrackers, and they don't even know the composition of the things. I mean, simply they are putting anything. I remember in our childhood we used to burn the firecrackers, nothing used to happen. But then when by the time um, I was in class 9, 10 or so, it became so difficult to get good firecracker, because most of the things which is not supposed to burst, it used to burst. And accident happened in my home also. So my father's hand got you know blazed. So it's very difficult. So we should always be careful, and it is always better to lessen the use of firecrackers. I can't say that you don't use, but it's always better to be careful. So then also in this was in 2012. So 5th September, we lost 40 people in this Shivkashi firecracker factory. And many villagers, went there to see after they saw the flares were coming up. But then, since many people went there, it was again a difficult situation to manage. So that is also there. Then we also had a disaster in Indian Oil Corporation, Jaipur. So 12 people were dead, and this there was a huge tank with a capacity of 8,000 kiloliters of petrol. So this was in 29, and 12 people, we could not save them, and thousands of people were evacuated after the petrol fumes were coming up. And breathing became very difficult, because whenever there is a chemical disaster, the most important thing is breathing difficulty, because the air is polluted. Or even if simple fire is also there, then also it becomes difficult to breathe because of the smoke and all. So many people become unconscious due to the smoke, and then it becomes really difficult if people are suffering already from heart disease and all. So that is the thing. Then we had in 2020, very recently, we had in Visakhapatnam LG polymer incident. So very poisonous stream gas leaked. And then you all must have seen in the videos that how people were being rescued to the hospital. Some they were taking in bikes, some in e-rickshaws, but people were falling unconscious on the roads, on the gullies, or on the footpaths. This was very difficult. And normally we do not have enough oxygen cylinders with us. Yeah, due to COVID and all, now we have become conscious, and we have started keeping oxygen cylinders, at least in mohalla or in your society. But then earlier, those kind of provisions were not there. So then the situation was even grave. So we also had many grave situations in many of the countries worldwide. So wherever it is manufacturing industry or storage facilities or transportation, as I've already mentioned, wherever it is there, there is always a chance that you will face some kind of chemical disasters. And you know chemicals could be anything. Those could be corrosive, those could be toxic, and those can react with something and explode. So it is always deadly. And it is also very critical for the environment. So when we are talking about this kind of thing, we should always remember that we are not only talking about people, but it is also very bad for the environment. Because in if it is in forest areas, like nowadays, many of the industries are being incentivized to open their firm or industry in hill region. So they are removing, they are reducing the tax amount, or they are reducing the power bill and all. I mean, electricity bill and all. Therefore, they are incentivizing, so that if the factories are open, if the industries are grown in the hilly areas, then that will increase the income generation. So that will help in livelihood generation for people. Therefore, they are being incentivized. But then we have to remember there are multiple effects of that. First of all, whenever you are building one industry on the hill slope, that itself is um, that will destabilize the hill slope. So because it is huge, so hill slope may not be capable of holding that, and that also destabilizes the entire area. Secondly, whenever you are setting up this kind of thing, then you are doing huge or mass deforestation. So that is also very important, because you are doing mass deforestation, then that also leads to landslides and other problems, and very local level or micro level earthquakes also. So that is there. And then again, if something goes wrong, so any explosion, anything, that is ultimately will lead to the environmental pollution, which is huge, and which is even possible that months together it will not be okay. So that is there. Then in 2005, basically in Texas City, United States, it was considered as US worst industrial disaster ever in last 15 years. So 15 people were killed and 180 were injured. In 2001, one explosion occurred in France. So one ship that was containing about 300 tons of downgraded ammonium nitrate in a chemical plant in Toulouse, that basically is a leading fertilizer producer. So that exploded and 31 people was dead, and that injured huge number of people, 4,500 people, and 27,000 buildings of that area was destroyed. So you can imagine the indirect impact of this kind of disasters is also huge, because direct impact is okay, you might say only 31 people has become dead, but then 4,500 people are injured. What about them? Maybe they have lost their hands, maybe they have lost their legs, maybe they are not able to stand, or maybe they are bedridden, maybe they are in coma. So just because they are not dead does not mean that they're in a condition that they can thrive for their rest of the lives. So it is very important. Maybe they are suffering from severe health problems for the rest of their lives. So who is going to take care of them? And the person who is dead, but what about the people who are alive, who are going through these serious problems? And then 27,000 buildings. Imagine the amount of compensation that government needs to give, because if 20,000 buildings are there, the company will simply uh, you know say that I don't have money, do whatever you want to do. You will arrest me, but I don't have money. But then that is not going to help the other people. Then government will be in the front. They will have to provide the money to the people. So these complications, simply because of some minor fault of maybe a single person, that can cause to this huge thing. So that is why we are explaining this. We are trying to, increase the awareness among people about this. So in February 2000, another thing in Romania city, so Baia Mare, there, a poisonous chemical spill that took place, and that destroyed wildlife, fish stocks, and also threatened the water supplies for 2.5 million people. Can you imagine? So the entire Central and Eastern Europe was affected by that. So this was huge. And then approximately 1 million meter cube of cyanide, you know, used in gold extraction process at the local mine, that was released into the river Somme. And the reservoir wall of the mine was also collapsed, and disaster was huge since Chernobyl. So after Chernobyl, it was the biggest disaster. So another deadliest chemical accidents took place in 1984, that is in Madhya Pradesh, central India. So there, in the middle of the night of 2nd and 3rd December, a combination of factors, ranging from hazardous handling of disastrous chemical substances to use of outdated and malfunctioning industrial equipments, what I was telling you, that we use the things until it is not working. So as much as possible we are using, and that becomes hazardous. And 5 lakh people were exposed to the toxic gas and byproducts. So, and nearly 3,800 officially confirmed deaths. So that is none other than our Bhopal gas tragedy. In 1974 also, in United Kingdom, we faced another hazardous industrial process. So there was a local chemical plant. So it was repairing one of its chemical reactors, and it took almost less than a minute to leak 40 tons of cyclohexane, which formed a vapor cloud with a diameter of about 200 meter. And then that cloud exploded and completely destroyed that plant, and also damaged around 1,800 buildings and almost 1.5 kilometers of radius. And whatever was there within that 1.5 kilometer of radius was entirely, damaged. So like this, many other incidents happened, but we are only, mentioning few of them. So here you see the major accidents of the factories that we have in Maharashtra itself. So here we are showing you the state profile, and here you can see that only in Maharashtra there are 38,150 registered factories. So registered factories in India means there will be almost similar number of, or at least very close number of factories which are not registered. And then there are working factories like 31,100. In that, some 3,200 chemical factories are there. So, and that MH factories, those are 336. So in Mumbai, Thane, Raigad, Pune, Kolhapur, Nasik, Nagpur, Aurangabad, Aloka, everywhere you can see that factories are there. And the maximum concentration is in Pune region. And then those are followed by Thane and Raigad. So there you have the maximum number of industries, and in Nasik also you have some good number of chemical industries. So what are the causes and consequences of these chemical disasters? So normally these disasters are caused by chemicals or mechanicals or civil or electrical or other process failures due to maybe accidents or negligence or incompetence, and industrial plant might spill over, and ultimately the result is huge that can cause damage to your life or property or environment. So chemical disasters are, always bringing you emissions, fires, and explosions. So those are really difficult things to handle. And in most of the cases, we end up in losing a lot of life. Therefore, it's always better to adapt with the things. It's always better to take precautions and avoid this kind of thing, because once it happens, it can have very prolonged effect on your health, on your livelihoods, on everything. So we have to be careful. And then in this kind of emergency situations, your illness could be for rest of your life. Your health issues could be with you for the rest of your lives. Your injury, if it is um, injury like you have lost your hands or legs or anything, then that is not going to come again, right? So we have to be that careful, because in most of the cases there is no way back. So there are many ways through which this can happen. Like the people who are handling the plant, they are not handling it properly, or they are producing toxic substances. There could be accidents in the storage facilities, handling large or various quantities of chemicals. Then accidents during the transportation, then misuse of chemicals, because sometimes maybe we are feeling that okay, this is a bit cheaper, let's use that, then that can cause huge. And then you know contaminating the foods, environment, overdosing the agrochemicals. That also, you might think that, okay, agrochemicals are not that harmful, but it is harmful. Most of the chemicals that we are using for our agriculture is not, recommended. So those are banned in other countries, and we are using that. That is why many of our things, doesn't go outside of our country, because they do not accept this kind of fertilizers or this kind of pesticides those we are using, or other poisons that we are using for pests and other bacteria and all. So also the waste management system in India is very poor, because the way we are managing waste is, that itself is hazardous, and we have lots of failure histories of waste management, and there are lots of accidents which are happening in the wastewater treatment plants. So there are technological system failures as well. There are failures of plant safety designs or plant components. So we need to ensure that we are doing it with the good engineers or certified engineers who has done it earlier. Then it could always caused by the natural hazards like earthquakes, landslides, tsunamis, cyclones, so many things. So, and ultimately the human error. So the chemicals could be highly reactive, it could be corrosive, radioactive, or toxic. So here is a chart. In this chart, you can see that the accidents, those have taken place, um, what were the reasons behind them. Okay, so you can see the maximum percentage that has taken place, the accidents is because of piping system. So either the pipe has leaked, or the pipe has exploded due to maybe heavy increased temperature, or due to reduced temperature. That is one most important cause. Then comes the procedural fault or management fault, and then contamination, because most of the times we are going for the cheaper options, therefore some contaminated thing is coming, and that ultimately explodes. Then we have material selection problem. So the range is huge, but then the maximum thing is causing by these things. So here you can see the exposure pathways. So look at the right hand side picture. Source means here is the source of your chemical or industrial hazard, and that can ultimately go anywhere. So this dotted lines will show you the airborne part. So through air, it can go to responder, to victim, to the river, to the soil, crops, animals, and then ultimately from the soil, it can go to the crops, then animals, and then from the food, it can go to people, to the children, and from the source directly also it can go to victim and responder. Then again, when it goes into the rivers or reservoirs through the drinking water, again it goes to public, and through the reservoirs it goes to aquifer, and finally that water is being taken by people. So the exposure pathways are manifold, whether it is soil, or whether it is river reservoirs, water, table underground, or whether it is air. From everywhere it can impact you, even if you are not directly present in that situation. So even if you are far away, ultimately from the source or through these pathways, that can come to you. So you have to be really careful. And then boiling, liquid expansion, vaporization. So this is one really important thing. So this is known as BLEVE, which is boiling, liquid expanding, vapor explosion. This is really important because most of the explosion that takes place during the transportation is BLEVE only. So what happens is, when you are getting some kind of vessel which is containing some kind of liquid flammable materials, which is pressurized, and it is due to some fault in transportation, that pressure is released somehow, or if there is any leakage or something, then the inside thing that try to come out. And because that vessel is made up of, heavy irons or something, then a huge kind of explosion takes place. So this is why the beliefs are really very important, because that could be hazardous because it is on the road. So you have so many cars on the roads, you can have I mean, your vehicle may be going in through some very congested area where people are there, children are there, elderly people are there, differently able people are there, and it many households could be there in the nearby areas. So that is why these beliefs are really very important. So I will stop here, and the next chapter will be taken up by Dr. Gopal. And I'm really thankful to Gopal for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts today with you. Thank you so much, Gopal, and over to you. Gopal, you're mute.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. Shweta, for your very elaborate introduction on chemical industrial disaster management. You have put forward some very useful, very new information, in fact. And the examples that you have quoted from the history from our past, they have made it even more important at this point of time to first of all know about them, and then the actions are to be taken, like how much more prepared. So, in fact, you have made the flow from your lecture to my lecture even easier by showing that table, in which we can see that with the time, the number of mortalities, the number of casualties are decreasing. So, what is the reason behind why these casualties have started to decrease? So this takes us into the legal framework of the chemical industrial disaster management. So thank you very much, Dr. Shweta, for your precious time, and you have delivered such amazing lecture. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal.
Thank you. So I will be, as I shared, I will be sharing sharing on legal framework. So I will just share my presentation here first. Just give me a moment. So I hope my presentation is visible. Can somebody confirm? This. Okay. So it's very important to know the legal and institutional framework on chemical disasters. So we have with the help of previous presentation, previous lecture, we have very well we are very well aware about the incidences that have taken place, the kind of loss, the kind of mortalities, casualties that they can cause, and in fact, the financial, economical loss they can cause, right? So that's why it's very important to put forward some uh, legal framework, some jurisprediction, so that these kind of disasters can be managed at the level of government with the help of law. So let's see. So if we would like to talk about the regulatory framework for the management of chemical disasters, so we can broadly, and especially for the context of India, for Indian perspective, we can divide this regulatory work in two phases, that is pre-Bhopal gas tragedy phase and post-Bhopal gas tragedy phase, because that particular incidence of that took place in December 1984, it has shaken up the entire world, and the consequences that accident that have caused, it has forced that whatever acts, whatever laws, regulations that are there, they need some kind of major amendments so that this kind of mishap does not repeat anytime in future. So uh, so if we see that pre-Bhopal gas tragedy, the regulations were mainly focused on on-site safety of workers, and uh, also to regulate off-site emergency system. But there was no point of when these regulations were talking about safe storage of hazardous materials and safe transportation of hazardous materials. It was not there in the line before the Bhopal gas tragedy. And you can see here that these all these acts and all these regulations, they existed before, and they were all focused on the on-site emergency. So after the Bhopal gas tragedy, the focus started to shift, and the more and more focus was they was trying to bring the focus to institutional and legal framework of management of hazardous substances. Then how to improve industrial chemical risk management. And after this incident, the more and more focus was given on disaster prevention in India, right? And the government has initiated many more new acts and have imposed amendments on the existing acts that are there to strengthen the safety and prevention related provisions. So, as I just mentioned, Government of India has enacted many new rules and amendments in the existing legislations, and one such act is Environmental Protection Act of 1986. It is also called the Umbrella Act, and this we can call it EPA, Environmental Protection Act. So this provides a comprehensive coverage and framework for all environmental issues, including risk management. So the rules and guidelines of EPA, they are mainly focused on hazardous chemicals, hazardous waste, biomedical waste, and so on. And other than this, it also focuses upon the safety in transportation, insurance, liability, and compensations. Although it was enacted in 1990s, but the focus was also brought upon these very important issues. Now, under EPA, there is one very important rule. It is called CA-EPPR rule, and it stands for Chemical Accidents, Emergency Planning, Preparedness, and Response Rules. So, um, this particular rule, it provided for the institutional mechanism at various levels of a country, be it national, state, district, or local levels, for the disaster preparedness, planning, and response, mainly dedicated to chemical accidents. Right? And although further it was incorporated into DM Act, Disaster Management Act of 2005. So this particular rule, CA EPPR rule, it was, you can say it was distributed into two groups, the responsibilities. So first group is the district crisis group, and the second one is the local crisis group. So the district crisis group is mainly responsible for reviewing the on-site emergency plans, and for the prepared by the occupiers of the units. And they also are responsible for monitoring the chemical accidents and conduct full-scale mock trials every year. And when they conduct mock trials, they will be coming up with many new modifications, many new alterations in the existing system. So also it is the responsibility of these DCGs to incorporate these changes and incorporate these lessons learned in the subsequent mock trials, in the next upcoming mock trials. So what local crisis group is supposed to do? They are supposed to educate the population that is likely to be affected in a chemical accident, and also they are also responsible for conducting one full-scale mock trial for a chemical accident every 6 months. So when we are talking about the institutional framework towards the management of chemical accidents, we can see here that at national level, institutions like NDMA, these ministries, Ministry of Environment, Forest, which is the nodal ministry when it comes to chemical disasters, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Labor and Employment, and so on. And on state levels, we have SDMAs, Departments of Factories and Boilers, pollution control committees we have in every state, medical and health, police, fire, industry and commerce departments. And specifically NIDM, it is mandated for capacity building, research, training and documentation of a disaster uh, and chemical disaster as well. And NIDM has developed many training modules dedicated to chemical disasters. And NIDM is also preparing a full-fledged National Chemical and Petrochemical Disaster Management Plan, which is soon will be available. So here you can see an outlook of institutional setup for chemical disaster management. You can see the role of central government here as part of ministries, then state government and UTs, SPCVs, PCCs, they also have to be involved in this. So this is all the list of acts and regulations that were all pre-existing before the Bhopal gas tragedy, and the rules and amendments that have happened after that tragedy. We can see here, I won't go very much in detail, but this such long list is now existing. And apart from all this, there are now also legal instruments for management of hazardous waste, because hazardous waste is also capable of causing equal amount of damage, casualty, and mortalities. So biomedical waste management handling rule is there. Then batteries management and handling rules is there. In fact, hazardous microorganism rules has also been there. And CPCB, SPCBs, and PCCs, pollution control committees, that are majorly responsible for implementing these rules, these acts. Now, if we want to talk about the international bindings and guidelines, like if you want to talk about the chemical disasters, chemical disaster management, what internationally we are talking about it. So the UNCED that has started their summits in 1992. So the Agenda 21 especially is dedicated to chemical industrial disaster management. When Agenda 21 was proposed, and what is Agenda 21? It is a comprehensive action plan of action, and which has to be followed globally by the organization of UN, governments, and major groups. So it encounters the human impacts on environment in every aspect. And so specifically the chapter 19 has been provided for environmentally sound management of toxic chemicals, including prevention of illegal international traffic in toxic and dangerous products. So this was the first time you can say at international level, such kind of a plan of action was proposed and was implemented and was very well received by the entire world. And this particular World Summit on Sustainable Development also talked about sound management of chemical and hazardous waste. So if you want to talk about its plan of implementation, its plan of implementation mainly focused on these four things. That is reducing the significant effects of chemical and hazardous waste and reducing their impact on human health and environment. Then implementing the new globally harmonized system for the classification and labeling of chemicals. So it's kind of a GHS is actually a kind of a sign language, you can say. So just a particular set of signs has been proposed with the help of which we can very easily identify which kind of chemical is being dealt with, whether in the industry, whether in the vehicle, or whether in the manufacturing unit. So this kind of language, this kind of globally harmonized system was very important, and then it was operational by 2008. Then preventing international illegal trafficking of hazardous chemicals and waste, and then it also included the strategic approach to international chemicals management. So the plan of implementation of Agenda 21 was focused upon these four things. And UNEP also has a chemical section and a particular list of programs under it. So I'm not going very much in detail. So, but I would like to take your attention to this very important event in February 2006, where over 190 countries, and India was one of them, they reached on a voluntary agreement, and that this came out to be known as Strategic Approach to International Chemicals Management. So this was a voluntary agreement to ensure safe use of chemicals by 2020. So India was very well active in this agreement, and there are many international organizations which are active in India and working very well in terms of this agreement, like WHO, ILO, World Bank. These organizations very well active. So since we are running out of time, so I will not go into the very much detail of this particular agreement. So lastly, I would like to talk about only two things: the environmental jurisprudence, liability, and litigation. So these two important, very important acts that majorly governs all the legal aspects, all the litigation aspects regarding any chemical accidents or any chemical mishap that happen. So first is the Public Liability Insurance Act of 1991. It was further amended in 92, and it particularly talked about that all the MAH units, all the major accident hazard units handling chemicals in excess of the threshold quantities referred to in the schedule, that are mandated to take an insurance policy before starting their activity. And also on the behalf of off-site population, they are supposed to deposit an equal amount in the ERF. ERF is Environment Relief Fund. So this fund will be activated if in case of any chemical accident happens, so that this ERF will be provided to the victims for the immediate rehabilitation work. So this relief shall be paid on the principle of no fault. So what is principle of no fault? It is that the claimant shall not be required to plead or establish that the death, injury, or damage was due to any wrongful act, neglect, or default. So principle of no default is basically you do not have to prove that your particular death, a particular injury or damage has caused because of that particular um, chemical accident. You don't have to prove you are liable, you are eligible for ERF to access the ERF. The next very important act was the National Environment Tribunal Act of 1995, and it was enacted to set up legal institution across the country. So this act is basically it is proposing strict liability for damages arising out of accidents occurring during handling of hazardous substances, and so that the effective and expunction disposal of cases arising from such accidents can be taken care of, and the relief and compensation of the damages caused can also be ensured. So this was the work of this act particularly. And lastly, the latest can be said it is the Disaster Management Act that have come into play, and which encompasses all the aspects of chemical accidents as one of the aspect of this entire act. It came into force on 26th December 2005, and the objective of Disaster Management Act is a holistic disaster management, and with focus on all stages and it proposes a paradigm shift from response and relief to prevention and mitigation. So DM Act was focused on improving our preparedness rather than improving our recovery or rehabilitation work. So this act mandated the institution of NDMA, SDMAs, DDMAs, and NIDM as well. Also, DM Act mandated the constitution of state executive committees. So what is the work of these state executive committees? They have to implement the national and state disaster management plans. Then they have to coordinate and monitor the body which is responsible for managing the disasters in the state. Then they also have to examine the vulnerability of different parts of the state in different forms of disasters. And they are also supposed to specify measures that are to be taken for the prevention and mitigation. So, and overall, these roles and responsibilities of each department of the state governments. The state plans should include pre and post disaster phases, cover all the entire aspects of them. And NDMA is the the one unit which is governing all these aspect and making sure the implementation of DM Act 2005. And NIDM is working with NDMA under NDMA as training and research in terms of training and research capacity building. So that's all from my part today. So thank you so much for being with us, for paying attention to all the lectures today. So I must share again here that this is just a half of the entire module that we wanted to discuss. And the next part where we will be discussing the National Chemical and Petrochemical Disaster Management Plans and the emergency preparedness, first responder aspects we will be discussing tomorrow. So please be with us tomorrow as well. So I can see some questions here. Okay. So I would really like to thank and I'm very grateful for our Executive Director, Sir Shri Taj Hassan Sir, and our HOD, Professor Anil Kumar Gupta Sir, for giving me this opportunity to organize this webinar. I'm grateful to Dr. Shweta Vaidya Das for taking out her precious time and deliver her elaborate lecture in this webinar. And I'm thankful to all the participants who have stayed with us till the end of this webinar. And I request you to stay with us tomorrow as well to gain the benefits of the other half of this webinar also. So thank you very much, everyone. With this, we have come to the end of this webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. So this was just a one-day webinar. Somebody is asking me, but we will have a part 2 of the same discussion tomorrow as well. So you can join tomorrow on same time. The links will be forwarded to you on the mails if you have registered. Thank you so much, everyone.